Okay, I think we can get started. So welcome everyone. Today's session is Making Global Goals, Local Business, Getting Started. So Jess, you can go on to the next slide, please. So my name is Claire and I'm the Global Goals Programme Coordinator at the UN Global Compact Network UK. And joining me today is Jess, our Global Goals Programme Manager. And we're delighted to have Kirsty Greenman, Head of Corporate Responsibility at Burges Salmon. Kirsty has kindly agreed to share some of her insights and experiences with engaging with and getting started with the goals. So next slide, please. So just a little overview of our agenda for today. For those of you who aren't so familiar with the UN Global Compact and the UK network, I will just start off and give a little bit of an introduction. Jess will then take over and talk to you about the business agenda and the SDGs. As I mentioned, Kirsty from Burges Salmon will share some of her insights. And to finish off the presentations, Jess is going to talk to you about the tools and resources that are freely available to help you on this journey. The second half of the session then will be an open forum, so open for you to ask questions and we're here to answer. As we do the presentations, you can start inputting those questions into the chat box. Of course, as well, you're open to unmute yourself later on and ask any comments or make any questions that you may have. In the meantime, while the presentations are going on, please just mute your microphones so we can eliminate any background noise. As you can see as well, this session is being recorded, so we're happy to share the recording and the slides after the session. If you have any technical difficulties or anything in the meantime, please do private message myself or Jess and we'll do our best to help you. So then just the session will finish off and we'll give you a little bit of a snapshot of some of the upcoming events and programs that we have in the coming weeks. So next slide, please, Jess. So as I mentioned, some of you will be aware of who we are and will have been to many of our events before, but I think there are a couple here who haven't. So we are the UN Global Compact, which is the world's largest corporate sustainability initiative. It launched 20 years ago when Kofi Annan was Secretary General. And today we have nearly 12,000 companies across the world who've made the commitment to our 10 principles to support sustainability, and over 3,500 non-business organizations such as NGOs, universities, and trade unions. And next slide, please. So the very essence of the Global Compact are 10 universal principles across the areas of human rights, labour, environment and anti-corruption, and you can see them there in front of you. The foundation provides a rock-solid basis for any corporate sustainability initiative or supplier code of conduct. They are truly universal principles based on treaties which were ratified by every country across the world. So it's a very powerful statement for a company to be able to point to this as a basis for their work. And next slide. So the UN Global Compact Network UK is the focal point for all UN Global Compact participants that are based in the UK. We work across or alongside 68 other local networks across the world and our colleagues in headquarters. Our mission is to turn global momentum on sustainability into practical local action. So what we do is support companies with the commitments they have made. And we work across three main work streams, which is business and human rights, climate action, and global goals, which this webinar today falls under. So it says there in a normal year, we do around 30 events, but this year we have far exceeded that with the nature of everything going online, as well as the introduction of our new team, the climate action team. So I'm not sure how many events we have reached, but maybe up to 60. So what we do is we cover a very broad range of themes and we go deeper into certain areas in working groups on modern slavery, diversity and inclusion, global goals, child labour and climate action. And we provide practical guidance for communication on progress. So next slide, please, Jess. So to join the Global Compact, and if you're not already in an organization which is a member, I would encourage you to look into it. Your CEO has to commit to 3 key pieces. Firstly, to operationalize the 10 principles throughout the organization. Secondly, to report annually on progress towards doing so. And then finally, to support the wider UN development agenda. So at the moment, that UN development agenda is best represented by the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which we're here to explore today. And I'm going to hand you over now to Jess, who will talk to you a little bit about the business agenda and the Sustainable Development Goals.
Thanks so much, Claire, and welcome everybody to the webinar today. So what are the UN Sustainable Development Goals? Well, from now until 2030, this is what the plan for the planet looks like. It was agreed by every member state of the UN. They were passed in 2015, following on from the Millennium Development Goals, and they apply to every country around the world. So the UN did the biggest consultation ever in arriving at this agenda, and it was then agreed unanimously, which is quite a feat. There are 17 goals, so you can see them here on the screen. They range from environmental goals, so looking at water and biodiversity and land, through to economic goals, so looking at decent work and economic growth, and social goals, looking at things like poverty and gender equality. The 17 goals are very closely interlinked, but together they'll bring about the future we want, so fighting those inequalities, tackling climate change, and creating a better world. Beneath the 17 goals sit 169 targets and 232 indicators to measure progress. So as I said, the goals apply to all countries. While it's government that made the commitment, achieving the goals will require support from all members of society and especially the business community. So why should business care about the SDGs? Well, I've got here a mashup of headlines and images that perhaps get a little bit more at the risk side. So starting in the top left corner, you can see the little lapel pin that Boris Johnson is wearing, and that's the SDGs wheel. So you might not get the impression from public statements that governments, like the UK government, is actively engaging around the SDGs, but they are in fact doing so. They are well aware of this agenda. It's already influencing policy, and we should expect it to influence policy more going forward. So it would be therefore imprudent of any company to ignore this agenda and think that it doesn't impact on them. Next, we've got a headline with Mark Carney, corporations told to draw up climate rules or have them imposed. It's actually referring here to the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, but the idea is applicable here. This is the direction in which the world is going. Any notion that engaging with this agenda is optional is illusionary. So it might not be mandated by law for now, but there are pressures coming in from all various different quarters, creating this expectation that companies are going to engage on this. And the gist of his point here is that if companies don't engage voluntarily, then it will be turned on them. The coronavirus has made this more difficult, and we skip down to the right-hand corner, the Shared Responsibility Global Solidarity Report. Just goes to show that had we been making more progress on the SDGs before the COVID crisis hit, our ability to respond to that crisis would have been greatly improved. So making our society and our economies more resilient to cope with the kind of shocks that we're seeing is exactly what is built into the SDGs. I mean, the question is really, is this a business issue? So the headline above that report there, Uber stripped of London licence due to lack of corporate responsibility. That's just an example from the UK, but any company that doesn't give these non-financial concerns as much attention as financial issues might deserve is going to be in for a surprise when these issues become financial very quickly. And nothing gets more financial than losing the license to operate. Strictly speaking, there's kind of the legal license to operate, and then there's the more notional social license to operate. And the Extinction Rebellion image of people taking to the streets points to the latter. You know, the public have spoken, they are speaking, this is the future they want. So I guess taken together, really, the idea of this slide is just to convey that there is a degree of risks to companies that ignore this agenda. let's go to the other side and look at the kind of tremendous opportunity with engaging with the Sustainable Development Goals. So the Business and Sustainable Development Commission convened shortly after the goals were passed, and they did a robust analysis of the potential impact of engaging around the goals. And they found that just by looking at a few of the key sectors that would be affected, the potential for $12 trillion of new business value every year by engaging with the agenda. This is a very pro-business agenda. So on a macro level, we've got a better educated and more productive workforce is good for business. Economic and political stability, well, that's good for business. More fair and just societies, climate resilience, these are all good for business, and this is what this agenda seeks to bring about. There's also benefits on the micro level. So if I read a few from here, we've got making a business more attractive for investors, improving management of the supply chain, procurement, improved competitiveness in the hiring. You know, it's proved many times over that the best and the brightest get to choose where they want to work. And where they want to work now is in organisations that demonstrate a purpose beyond just profit. So just going back to COVID-19, which is obviously one of the biggest things on our agenda this year, I mentioned the missed opportunity in not making more progress towards the goals and how that would have left us better prepared for the pandemic. And that applies to businesses too. You know, now forewarned, we need to catch up. And we coordinated a letter in the summer, along with 150 other business leaders, calling on the UK government to align their recovery strategies with the SDGs. It's not enough that we just make a green recovery. That's obviously going to be critically important, but we need that balance between social, environmental and economic that the SDGs bring about. And we think that the SDGs is the best way that the government can ensure policy coherence. And going forward, embracing the goals in your business is the best way that you can create a resilient, sustainable and a strong business. So that leads us really nicely onto our guest speaker for today, Kirsty, who's going to be sharing Burges Salmon's sustainability journey. So as I mentioned, or as Claire mentioned, do put your questions in the chat box and we'll answer those at the end of the presentation. But for now, I'll stop and hand it over to Kirsty.
Great, thank you, Jess. Fantastic to be with you today and to have this opportunity to talk about the UN Sustainable Development Goals. So as Head of Corporate Responsibility at Burges Salmon, I'm heavily involved in setting the strategic direction for responsible business and sustainability. And that has a particular focus across diversity and inclusion, community involvement, and very importantly, the environmental agenda. I think I've been working with the goals, probably since 2015. I've been with Burges Salmon for the last 2 years, but I also worked with the SDGs in a large multinational corporate environment, which shows the applicability of the goals in different scenarios. So I've also been involved within the Bristol Sustainable Development Goals Alliance, and we've been involved in developing a local voluntary review at a city level to talk about demonstrable progress against the goals within the city. So this morning I'm going to share some of the approach we've taken at Burges Salmon. But I would say it's not the only way, and there are tools available from the UN Global Compact, and I'd also be interested to hear if you've got experience in your approach in terms of engaging with the goals. So moving on, why engage with the goals? So just to give you a little bit of background, Burges Salmon, we are an independent commercial law firm. We have an office in Bristol, Edinburgh and London. We do international work through a preferred firm network, but we're an organisation of about 800 people. We have a real sort of place-based approach to our sort of sustainability and community work. Our client base is quite diverse. We do work in the public sector. We've got large multinational organisations as clients, down to sort of local authorities and private wealth individuals. So quite a wide client base. We've got a long-standing commitment to responsible business, and we framed it, as you can see here on this slide, around marketplace, community, environment, and importantly, with our people at the heart of that, because ultimately, if you don't get the people bit right, you can't deliver on the other aspects. But why the goals have been so important to us, it's as Jess explained, they are really a roadmap for future success. If you look at the work that's gone into putting the goals together through the work of the UN and that roadmap to 2030, and that they are considering those large macro sustainability trends of population growth, climate change, how we address inequalities, there's a real opportunity there to be successfully, socially, environmentally, and also commercially, because they're also about where there's going to be increasing levels of demand in the marketplace. For us as well, they're also about good practice and providing a different lens on the work we've done to date in terms of responsible business and sustainability. And I think as well, one of the things I really like about the goals is how they're applicable, you know, whether you're a multinational organisation, whether you're an intergovernmental organisation, down to much smaller types of organisations, and even at an individual level. And for me, they're also a positive message, and positive messages, in my experience, tend to bring people along because it's more about what we can do rather than what's wrong. So if I talk about how we've mapped and considered prioritisation, so if we move on to the next slide. So really, to get started, we considered each goal and really just built a very simple table. But what is important when looking at the goals is to really consider, what is this goal about? And you only do that by looking at the targets underneath and seeing what the objectives are related to that goal. So I'd always say, go a little bit deeper. Don't just take the headline of that goal. Then it was considering, well, how does this relate to what we do? And for us as a law firm, that was also about how does that relate to the services that we're delivering? So where are our legal expertise, and which markets and what sort of clients are we supporting, and what's that wider impact? It's important as well, you know, what are we doing internally, and also consideration in terms of the supply chain. We also considered about our impacts, and you have to do that, not only the good things we're doing, but also, you know, what are we doing potentially that's negative or against this goal, because that gives an insight in terms of the sort of things that we need to mitigate or think about doing differently in future. So when we kind of got that mapping, we moved on to the materiality piece, because there are 17 goals and we wanted to be a little bit more specific. So we considered, how much resource do we put into addressing this goal? How is it related to our strategy? And importantly as well, another aspect is to actually engage with stakeholders as well, because it's no good us saying, oh, we think this is really important, and to have that credibility, definitely need that sense check with the stakeholders. And then we also had to think about what were we measuring that would show our impacts or the progress we were making in terms of taking action on this goal. So if you move on to the next slide. So from doing that mapping and materiality work, we identified 10 and we validated this with a selection of our stakeholders as well, that we felt were most relevant to us, and where we also had the greatest opportunity for making a positive contribution towards the delivery of that goal towards 2030. And then we've linked them together into 5 overarching responsible business objectives. And then we're using these objectives to consider, what do we need to be doing internally as an organisation? How does this link to the legal services and the sort of clients that we're working with? And also, what sort of collaboration should we be pursuing and nurturing, particularly with charities and not-for-profits. So within our current 5 areas of focus, we've got a focus on well-being and mental health, and that's proved highly important as we've gone through the pandemic this year. We've got a focus of inclusivity in the workplace and recognising the links with social mobility and how important that is in delivering social change. The next one is all about environmental sustainability, and I'll focus on that. And as our law firm, we are actually leaders in the renewable energy sector, so that's why you can see affordable and clean energy there. But it's importantly recognising that the environment is not separate to people, and that environmental solutions need to link in with community benefits as well. The fourth one is recognising that we are a commercial entity, we're an employer. A lot of our client work is around infrastructure and transport and generating new job opportunities. But within that, we want to be advocates for work that is inclusive and fair. So that's things like advocating for the living wage, addressing modern slavery, and making sure that recruitment practices are inclusive and not barriers. And then really, I suppose the fifth one, which sits across all of those and incredibly important, it's how we work collectively for that greater impact. And that's how we work internally within the firm. As I said, those external collaborations that we seek, and also working with our client base as well. And if I move on to the next slide, I can give an example of what this really means in practice. So if we take goal 3, which is about good health and well-being, we've had a really strong focus, an increasing focus on well-being within the firm. And we've trained a number of colleagues as mental health first aiders. So that's an example of what we're doing internally. We've sought out external collaborations, so we've worked with the charity Mind to help inform our approach in that way. And also we've been able to benefit that organisation and the people they then work for in terms of donations, pro bono work. And we're also collaborating through Thrive, so that's sharing approaches on how to address wellbeing within the wider business and other types of organisations, so within the sort of business community. And you can see on this slide, this is an example of our medical and healthcare legal expertise, where we're actually working and supporting the fight against COVID. So you can see the different elements there. So what's next for us in terms of our journey with the Sustainable Development Goals? If we move on to the next slide, one thing we really need to, I think, enhance is the performance measures. So at the moment, we do have a suite of indicators which tell a story of performance across those key different aspects of inclusivity, community impact and environment. But we do want to link those much more strongly. And once we get performance measures which are more robust, that enables us to really clarify our ambition towards 2030. So we're starting work, for example, on science-based targets in relation to the climate agenda. And once we've got that, we see that as an opportunity to align ambition across other suites of indicators. So that will help us on our journey and basically tell us how we're doing. We're also going to use the goals to continue to inform the direction of our business, because as I said, if the Sustainable Development Goals are really a roadmap and they are a fantastic insight into how the world's changing, it makes sense to make the most of that in terms of what are the areas of the business we should be looking to grow and respond to that increasing demand. We know from our stakeholders we've been asked to share our approach more as we're doing today and continue to collaborate. And then I think what's also really important, yes, we're currently sort of identified 10 that are priority, but all the goals are important and it's important not to forget them, and also recognising that there is interconnectivity between them. So we're not just throwing the other 7 out, they are still on the agenda. And then if I come on to final thoughts on the next slide, I would say there's no right or wrong way. Have a go and get started. I wouldn't overthink it, and I would say the process of engaging with the goals, it's an iterative process, and you will need to engage with people within your organisation and your stakeholders. I've always found it's better to have a draft and something to work with. So yeah, just have a go and get going with them. As I said, that engagement with the stakeholders is incredibly important, because that is your sense check, and that's what will make credibility for you. I think the SDGs provide a different lens and broaden the conversation. They are becoming more widely adopted, so it's a shared vocabulary that you can use to engage with stakeholders and other organisations. It's important as well to really explain what they mean in practice. There's lots of different terminology when it comes to the sustainability agenda, so it's always good to explain, what does this actually mean, as I did on that slide there, in terms of actually action and tangible examples. I would always say as well, my experience of the SDGs, you can always find through doing that mapping exercise examples of positive contribution, and that's a much better place to start, and particularly engaging with more senior management, rather than it's just a negative story. So I think the SDGs are incredibly helpful in that regard. And then I just want to leave you with a quote on the final slide, which I think summarises it quite nicely. The vision must be followed by the venture. It's not enough to stare up the steps, we must step up the stairs. So we could spend a lot of time analysing the goals, but I think taking action is far more important. Thank you.
Kirsty, thank you so much. That was brilliant. Really, really useful to hear about your own journey and how you kind of got to that stage of having some priority SDGs to then work on. And I think that piece about engaging stakeholders is really valuable. But I think some of those tips there that you shared in your final thoughts were brilliant, and I'm sure lots of people on the call will find those really useful. Another reminder, if you've got any questions for Kirsty this time, do pop them in the chat, and hopefully we'll be able to get to them and answer them afterwards. Go on.
I would also say, if anyone wants to connect with me or pick up, or they have thoughts afterwards, you can find me on LinkedIn, or I'm sure if you contact the UN Global Compact, they will connect us.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Kirsty. So just really to touch on some of the steps that Kirsty was talking about, and provide you with some of those tools that can actually get you started with doing the kind of engaging with the SDGs in your business. And we wanted to share just a few of the tools and resources that we think are really, really helpful, depending on what stage you're at. So one of the first ones that I've got on the screen here is the SDG Compass, which provides guidance on how you can align your strategies as well as measure and manage your contribution to the SDGs. It's done in 5 steps, and you'll recognise some of these steps that Kirsty was talking about, that they've gone through themselves. So the first one really is about understanding the SDGs, and we've done a lot about that today, but there's loads of guidance on the SDG Compass, which can help you and your colleagues understand a little bit more about what the SDGs are themselves. And then you can see there's the next 4 steps, which kind of go in this continuous loop. And so the idea is that you can join it at whatever stage you're at, but also that there'll be kind of continuous improvement. So the first step is looking at defining your priorities. So as Kirsty mentioned, there are 17 SDGs, and they're all important, they're all interlinked, but for you as a business, it's really important, we think, to work out what your priorities are going to be and really focus your impact on a number of those SDGs. So the first step is providing that guidance and really helping you to define what your priorities are. The second step then is setting goals. So working out what the scope of your goals is going to be, setting your level of ambition. The third step is integrating that, so embedding that across your organisation. And then the fourth step is reporting and communicating. So exactly that piece on how you communicate that with your stakeholders and how you talk about your performance and your impact. And as I mentioned, it then kind of loops back around. So once you've done that reporting, communicating piece, maybe that's again a time to look at your priorities to see whether they're still relevant or whether you need to redefine them, or maybe it would then be kind of resetting goals or really focusing again on how you're going to further integrate that through your organisation. So, so that's a bit of a brief overview of the SDG Compass, but as with all of the tools, it's free, it's online, it's available for anybody to use, and I really would recommend you go and have a look at some of the guidance in there because it's really valuable. The second resource that I wanted to share is fairly new, and it's called the SDG Action Manager. This was developed by UN Global Compact in cooperation with B-Lab. So essentially it's a self-assessment tool which asks you a number of questions based on each of the SDGs. So the idea is that you kind of create a basic company profile and answer some basic questions about the nature and scope of your organisation. And then if you want, you can answer questions about all of the different SDGs, or hopefully by answering those few initial questions, and then guide you towards which questions might be relevant for you to answer. And the idea is that you can really get a very clear picture about your strengths are, particular SDGs, where you can really maximise your positive impact, or the reverse side, you know, where some of your weak areas or maybe even your risks are. And you can use the dashboard to then set goals and track improvement. You can invite your colleagues in. So once you've done those first initial steps of setting up a company profile, you can invite your colleagues to collaborate with you. So you might be inviting people from the HR team to answer the questions around gender equality, or people from procurement to answer questions around goals as well. So it's a really valuable tool. It's got more information there, a little bit about benchmarking and some improvement guides. And I should say that all of that information is just for your purposes. So it's not a kind of public profile. You don't need to worry that when you're answering these questions, other people are going to be able to see. It's purely just for you to be able to get a really clear picture. So I would recommend that as kind of our second tool. And then the third one that I want to talk about is the blueprint for business leadership on the SDGs. And I guess this is really looking at that next step. So once you've already defined what your priority SDGs are, or perhaps what SDGs you want to focus on, the blueprint then goes into some real depth on each of those specific SDGs. It tells you what the different targets are. It tells you, you can see there at the bottom, what doing action towards the SDG might then impact on some of the other SDGs. It gives you business case examples, so examples of what other organisations have been doing to advance that particular SDG. And then critically, it's got these 5 leadership qualities, and you can see a screenshot there on the screen for goal 5. And it asks you some questions to really start to get you to critically analyse what you're doing for that particular goal. So it's really looking at being the leaders, and it suggests some actions that you can then do to really advance it. So lots of great valuable content on that, and another tool that I'd recommend just having a look. And as I said, they're all free and available online. And the last one that we wanted to touch on is the Relics SDG Resource Centre. Again, a really valuable resource which has got tons of content about all of the different specific SDGs, and we've pulled some graphics there from the website. Again, really just a great resource to get a little bit more inspiration, find out what's going on, find out what some of those key issues are, or some of the key areas of innovation, and a nice way to spend a few hours just kind of really reading up on some of the different individual SDGs. So that was a very whistle-stop tour of some of our kind of recommended resources and tools, but we'll share the slides afterwards, and we'll include links to all of those so that you can go away and have a look at them in your own time. I think that's it from us in terms of presenting, but really, as we said, this is an opportunity now for you to ask any questions that you have, either to me or to Kirsty, so do get them on in the chat box and we'll have a look at their own questions.
So I can see there's a question in the chat saying, did I face any particular resistance and engagement either within the organisation or key stakeholders? I can honestly say not. I'm very lucky. Burges Salmon, I said, is a long-standing commitment really to responsible business and sustainability. But I think having taken a very sort of thorough and logical approach, I've definitely been asked questions. You know, why certain goals hadn't been prioritised compared to others. But being able to explain the process of going through that, and I said particularly looking at the targets underneath the goal have been very helpful within that. And I think as well, also taking the time to explain the benefits of the goal and why they're advantageous. And I think sometimes as a sustainability professional, kind of assume everyone's really aware of climate change and population growth and biodiversity loss, and they're not. So sometimes I definitely find it helpful just to remind people with a few facts and figures. And then, you know, then there's the Sustainable Development Goals, which really provide this opportunity in terms of positive action, and that seems to have worked so far.
Thanks, Kirsty, that's really helpful. I can see a couple of questions in there. So one about the SDG Ambition Programme. And I think Claire has got a slide that we'll share, which has some more details about SDG Ambition. So perhaps we'll wait until we get to Claire's slide and then we can answer that question about joining. There's another question there, which is about, I would like to ask how and where you can use the SDG goals. If you believe that a set of goals relate to your company, are you able to use them on the website and social media? Do you have to be a member of anything to use them? So the simple answer is you can use them where and however you like. There is on the website, and I think either Claire and I can share a link shortly, on the UN website, a page which you can download all of the specific icons, and there's guidance there about exactly how you use them and the kind of branding guidelines for using the SDGs. But essentially, they are there for you to use. So if you think that they're available, they're kind of relevant to your company's activities, then you're welcome to add them to your website. You can use them on social media, and we really do encourage you to do that, because the more that you can share and kind of add them into your reports and communications, the more that you can share about what you're doing towards the SDGs, the greater the visibility will be, and the greater your stakeholders will be able to understand what you're kind of impacting. And I think Kirsty touched on it, but the SDGs are a global language now for sustainability. They've been around for 5 years. If you look at some of the kind of some of the companies' annual reports that are really advancing on sustainability, you'll see the SDGs there, and that's not just restricted to the UK. That's across the world. So I really would encourage you to use them because they're becoming this global language, and because anybody that will be visiting your website or social media will really be able to recognize them and instantly kind of understand what you're doing in those certain areas. So yes, we'll try and get the link for you before the end of the session, but you can search them online, and there's a web page that you can download all of the different icons and understand the branding guidelines behind that. So I think we've got a question here, and I'm going to direct this one to you, Kirsty, I think. How are you raising awareness amongst employees? Are you providing any awareness sessions or training?
Yeah, so fortunately I've had opportunity to speak at our annual general meeting and basically talk through pretty much what I've talked through today to the entire firm. And the SDGs are referenced every time we talk about responsible business, and it's not only me, it's also our senior partner and our managing partner, who are like the chairman and CEO in other organisations. So fortunately there is that real support. Also, when I do presentations to new employees and also sort of trainees in vacation schemes, we always make reference to the SDGs. Also, as well, I'm delivering some training sessions, and I found the SDGs are really helpful. You can do like a light touch materiality exercise, just get them to pick out a couple of SDGs they think are really relevant for the organisation and why. So yeah, actively encouraging people to engage with the SDGs, and we also use them within our communications internally and externally too.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Kirsty. And I think that kind of light touch materiality exercise that you just discussed there, I think that's a really great one. We've done it a couple of times in some of our webinars, even just to kind of get individuals to think about which SDGs are most important to them. If you're asking them to highlight which ones they think are most important to the organisation, really gets them to start thinking about them, looking at the SDGs, understanding what they are, and really engaging with them. So I think that's a really good exercise. We've got a question about are there any practical examples establishing the correlation between the SDGs implementation and economic success that you can recommend? Unfortunately, this remains one of the main questions when enforcing SDGs, especially at the time of the pandemic. Really interesting question. I think the stat there that I shared at the beginning is a valuable one, and I think there's some research there that we can find to kind of back that point up. And I again mentioned the Relics SDG Resource Centre, because I think there's some really fantastic articles and resources on there that you can explore that would kind of provide that evidence there, Olga, that you're looking for. I guess a question for Kirsty really on the back of that. Have you faced any kind of barriers, or have you had to kind of provide evidence of that kind of financial side of things, or the economic success that relates to SDG implementation in your organisation?
So fortunately, going through the materiality and mapping exercise, because we actually looked at revenue generation related to the kind of legal expertise, it kind of demonstrated that really early on. And for example, the renewable energy sector, which we've related to goal 7 and the healthcare goal 3, are absolute growth areas for the firm. So I kind of think that the proof's in the pudding. So yes, have been able to demonstrate that. And I think that's also important as well when considering the SDGs. You do have to sort of really consider what your core offering is in terms of goods and services. So for example, if you're a coal-fired power station and you weren't to consider, the energy elements and the environmental impact, it's just not credible. And I think that's helpful in terms of thinking about how your business needs to evolve for the longer term success.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely agree there. And Kirsty, I'm going to ask you another question. This one comes from Judy, who suggested, or who asked, do you think that introducing KPIs around the SDGs for employees, so I assume that's the kind of KPI specifically for employees, can support greater engagement?
I think if your organisation is that mature, my experience is there probably needs to be some work prior to that in terms of getting non-financial targets and measures across the kind of management team. But yes, I could see that working, and certainly that is good and best practice in terms of getting alignment, in terms of delivering sustainability across the organisation.
Brilliant, thank you.
We're on the journey.
Yeah, definitely. Well, it's a journey, isn't it? And I think we had a member, now I'm trying to remember who it was, who just started on the process of linking kind of performance reviews and performance bonuses with performance around the SDGs. And I think it's definitely a really interesting area to tackle, but helpful to hear from other businesses and kind of understand where they might be at, and if anybody's got any best practice to share. So we've got a question from Charlotte, who said, my company is a UN Global Compact member, but she's not involved in any internal task force or groups. Am I still able to access workshops or working groups or related material? Great question, Charlotte. So great to hear that you're a UN Global Compact member. We also have membership of the UN Global Compact UK network, and so it'd be worth checking if your company is also a member of our local network, because then we get extra access to those working groups and to some of the other more exclusive events that we do for our members. And if your company is not a member of the UK network, then do just get in touch with us, because it's quite a relatively straightforward process to then join us. I will say that a lot of our events, probably about a third, maybe even a half of our events, are open to everybody. We have recordings and all of the material that's available. So do have a look, and that applies to everybody. Do have a look about what's going on our website, and I think Claire's going to share some of our upcoming events shortly. And there'll be all of the materials there that you can access. So hopefully that answered that question. Super, thanks. Excellent.
A question from Gareth talking about the goals and specific implications for not-for-profits. So as I said, our organisation, its directness in terms of the collaborations with the types of organisations we want to work with, that will help us achieve the goal or contribute towards the achievement of the goal. So I think there's a real opportunity for not-for-profits and charities. And Jess, you may be able to, but I understand that as a charity or not-for-profit, you can actually apply to say that you are an active deliverer towards that goal as well, which again I think can give you great profile and opportunity as a not-for-profit.
Yeah, absolutely, Kirsty. And I would just agree there, following up on giving you that profile and that visibility using that kind of global language that we've talked about with the SDGs. And I think there'll be a lot of opportunities with it. And actually, Kirsty will be able to speak, because she's actively involved in the Bristol SDG Alliance, that we're seeing a lot more local action, not just national action, but local action towards the SDGs. And cities are, so for example, Bristol, and we've now, Liverpool have announced that they're going to be doing a voluntary local review. Cities are starting to look internally at kind of engaging all sorts of different stakeholders and how they can really progress the SDGs. And I think there's a really important role there for not-for-profit organisations. And I know that they're very active in Bristol, and they've been including universities and other community groups and all sorts of different types of organisations, and that's really important, because I think collaboration and partnership for the goals, it's obviously one of the goals, but is going to be really key for us to be advancing them. So I think there's a lot of opportunities. I think there's a really important role, and yeah, I'd say I think it's really valuable in exploring that, but also talking to some other not-for-profit organisations that are perhaps already engaging with the SDGs and learning from some of their experiences with them. I think we've got probably time for one last question, and thanks, Kirsty, for being able to spot the one from Gareth, because I kind of disappeared on my list. But a question from John, who said, what size business do you think the corporate responsibility or sustainability becomes somebody's only role rather than one of several responsibilities? That is a really, really great question. I have no idea. It really depends on the makeup of the business, I guess. And Kirsty, I'll ping this over to you to see if you've got any thoughts in a minute. I think an interesting evolution, I guess, that we're seeing at the moment is that a lot of kind of sustainability roles, and again, Kirsty, you can tell me whether I'm right or wrong here, a lot of sustainability roles are kind of historically grown out of typically energy managers or environmental roles. But as sustainability, as we understand it now, is encompassing a lot more different areas, it's growing not just from that kind of environmental or energy roles, but starting to encompass some of the more social sides of the organisation. So an example, looking at kind of engaging your HR department around things like gender equality, living wage, looking at your procurement department, and maybe looking at your operations, or looking at whichever different aspects. I think it's now growing to a point that sustainability is not just becoming one person's role, but becoming part and parcel of the whole organisation. And a particular programme, and Claire's going to share a little bit more information about this, which we're going to be running, SDG ambition is really looking at that next step and how you incorporate sustainability in your strategy and your business model, so that it's not just one person's role, but it's actually the plan for the entire organization. No, I don't know whether that actually answers your question, but I think that's kind of the way that we're seeing it, definitely growing out into several responsibilities. And I don't think that necessarily relies on the particular size of the business. But I suppose, Kirsty, I'll refer to you here, whether you've got any thoughts that you can feedback, or you can say, Jess, you're completely wrong in that aspect.
Well, I've been working in this space as, I'd say, a sustainability professional for 15 years, but you know, I'm of an age now where you first started on your career, you didn't just immediately become a CR coordinator, or and what I have seen, particularly even over the last year, there seems to be more and more job opportunities. So it's obviously getting much more recognised as a need. I think responsible business and sustainability is part of everyone's job, and that's really important to always have that messaging within an organisation. And it comes down to, you know, what does a corporate responsibility or a sustainability person do? And you certainly can't do it alone. I've been very fortunate, or maybe it's the way I am, I've never really been given a job role or told what to do. There's elements around communication, there's a lot of influencing, and then there is a professionalism as well, for example, like engaging with the SDGs and being able to communicate that and bring people on board. And I think really, as Jess said, it depends on the makeup and the nature of the organisation. But what I would say, if you see a need within your organisation, don't be afraid to ask, make the case, and make the challenge. And I think that is a real skill for a sustainability professional, and it's about bringing other people along and helping to, you know, fill those gaps, but always with an explanation around what's the opportunity, what's the benefit, or what's the risk if we don't. So yeah, can't quite give a definitive answer on that, but hopefully that's helpful.
Yes, I think that's brilliant, and I think those were fantastic words to end on. Really, really inspiring and yeah, really useful. I think I would exactly echo what Kirsty said. If you see a need, then I think just go for it, and don't be afraid, or don't kind of wait for somebody else to fill that gap. I can see that there's some more questions coming in, but we are cutting it close to time, so I will pass on to Claire to share a little bit about our events and programmes, but she will be sharing our contact details, I think, at the end of the presentation. So if you do have any more questions, then feel free to drop us an email and we will hopefully share them there. So Claire, over to you.
Great, thanks very much, Jess. So you can go on to the next slide. So I guess here's just a little snapshot of some of our upcoming events. You can find out more about them on our website. So coming up on the 16th of November, we have Disrupting the Status Quo to Leave No One Behind, a conversation about inclusion. This will feature two inclusion experts who kind of disrupt the status quo and are really there to have open, honest conversation about what we need to do to make inclusion effective. Then we also have our Black Lives Matter and Business webinar series. This was a 6-part series and we have done 4 sessions already, so there's 2 still to go. So if you haven't been part of these, I would highly recommend you sign up. This series, I suppose its aim was to better understand and confront the inequalities and issues that arise from racism and discrimination in the workplace, and to gain practical tips on active inclusion and changing corporate culture. And there have been some really, really great practical tips coming out of this webinar series. Finally then, we have our Climate Forum, which we're really excited to be launching on the 25th and 26th of November. Obviously this year, COP26 was due to take place in the UK and unfortunately had to be postponed until next year. So we are bringing together business, government, civil society leaders to shape and showcase ambitious climate action. The event will feature a programme dedicated to supporting businesses to transition to a net zero future. And we will have lots of different sessions, including carbon offsetting debate, just transition and the climate goals, and some really, really big names in there as well. So I would recommend you to check that out. So on to the next slide. Then a couple of the Global Compact programs. So these programs currently are just open to members. Our SDG Ambition program, the deadline for this program is going to be the 16th of November. This is a new program, and it's a 6-month accelerator program to empower and equip participants to raise their level of ambition and develop innovative business strategies to significantly increase their positive impact on the SDGs. I guess this program will enable you to learn how to strategically prioritize actions that will accelerate your company's contribution to the 2030 agenda, set targets aligned with absolute benchmarks, and to kind of hardwire SDG related business goals and outcomes into core processes and management of business. Now, I think somebody asked earlier, Kendall maybe, and I think I have actually been liaising with you over email about applying for this program if you're not already a member of the Global Compact. I can follow up with you on this. I think because to become a member it might take a couple more, I think, what do we have left? 2 weeks until the deadline. It might take a little bit longer than that, but I can see what we can do and maybe if we can speed up that application. But if not, there are plenty of resources available at the moment, including our 3 SDG ambition guidelines. There's lots of webinar series, and this is going to be a rolling program. So Jess, you can correct me on this, but I think this program will start in January 2021, and then the second one, will it be in the second half of 2021 or beginning of 2022?
I think that's the plan at the moment. Definitely that we're going to be continuing to repeat the program, and I imagine that we'll be starting the second round next autumn.
Next autumn. Okay, so yeah, so it's not so long to wait actually. I thought it was 2022, so that's okay. But yeah, as I said, if you are interested in any of these, you can find out more information on our website, theunglobalcompact.org.uk. So I will just hand you back to Jess just to say last couple of words, and that's it.
Thanks, Claire. Yeah, I just really wanted to say a huge thank you to Kirsty for being able to share experience with us today and all the insights and some really valuable tips. And as I said, we will be sharing the slides and recordings afterwards so that you can go back and have a look at some of that final thoughts that Kirsty shared with us. But thank you so much for being able to join us. Thank you to Claire for being able to set up the webinar and doing a fantastic job speaking and presenting to the participants. A huge thank you to all of our sponsors who've made this series possible. So thank you to Relics, thank you to Aviva, and thank you to N-Bound Group. And finally, thank you to you all for being able to join us today. I think I do have our contact details on the last slide there. So if you've got any more questions, do get in touch with us. And otherwise, we hope to see you at one of our future events.